This is SkyFlakes. On the surface, it's just another bland cracker, but for many Filipinos, this is fuel for a long, hard day of work. It's what you grab if you're in a rush or if you just don't want to spend on breakfast. This was enough for you to kickstart your day and take on the world. But despite it being one of the biggest brands in the Philippines, I really didn't know much about SkyFlakes. And I didn't know that there was a crazy underdog story behind the brand. Now this story, the journey of the man behind SkyFlakes, it's a bit of a tragic one, but if it weren't for him, the brand probably wouldn't be around today. This is the brand origin story of SkyFlakes and how its founder, M.Y. San, created a product that became a part of the everyday life of the Filipino workforce. My name is Chris, welcome to Brand Origins. This episode was made possible by The Sauce. The Sauce is the only news page that I can actually keep up with because honestly, I don't really have the time to consume these long news reports, but I still want to get updated. And that's why I like The Sauce, because they make this easy to consume with their visuals that are clear, short, and straight to the point. And I can stay updated without leaving Instagram. It's bite-sized news that cuts through all the noise. So follow them. It's at thesauce.ph on Instagram. The links are in the description. Now, the story of SkyFlakes starts with this guy, and you're probably familiar with this name because it's plastered on every pack of SkyFlakes. M.Y. San. M.Y. San stands for Maryuk San. So way before SkyFlakes became a household name here in the Philippines, Maryuk San actually had a wild story of how he built his own biscuits empire. Maryuk San was a Chinese entrepreneur who moved from Yongshan to the Philippines in the year 1900. He was around 22 years old that time. 5 years later, when he was around 27, he decided to move to Manila. And so his brothers, along with this one relative named Marchu, they helped him out. Now this Marchu guy, he's gonna play a role later, so just take note of him. So along with his brothers and Marchu, they were able to help him, and so they moved to Manila. And when he moved to Manila, he was like, you know what? I'm gonna open an ice cream parlor because why not? And he was able to do this with the help of Marchu. Marchu knew a lot about making all sorts of food products because he was actually a pretty skilled baker because he got training in Hawaii. So they put up this ice cream parlor and they put this up in Escolta, Manila in 1905. Now this was a great spot because during that time, it was one of the busiest streets in the country. I mean, it's still a busy area now, but that time it was like a business district. Because if you didn't know, Escolta at one point was called as the Wall Street of the Philippines because that's where the offices of the biggest banks and financial institutions were. It's in one of the oldest streets in Manila, created in 1594, and is in the middle of the oldest Chinatown in the world, Binondo. This was the center of Chinese commerce even before the Spanish colonial period. Most Chinese merchants coming from Fujian, China would stay there. So they put up the ice cream parlor. And at first, it wasn't an instant hit. It actually struggled at first. But they were very determined, and so they stuck with it and kept at it, and over time, it actually grew to something bigger. When the store started to grow, they didn't just sell ice cream anymore. They started selling these other products. And eventually, the shop became known not for its ice cream, but for its sweets and biscuits. But then before the store could grow even bigger, his stay in Manila was cut short because he had to go back to China in 1912. The Chinese Revolution, which led to the collapse of the 200-year reign of the Qing dynasty. This was led by Sun Yat-sen, and Maryuk San was a big fan of Sun Yat-sen. And so he was like, hey, this is my chance to help. This is my chance to show my support. And who knows, I may even be able to start a business there. And so Maryuk San tells Marchu, hey man, you know, I trust you. Please handle the business while I'm away. And just like that, Maryuk San went back to China. And so while he was there in Canton, he looks around, he studies the area, and he figures, you know, I think I can build a business here again. I mean, the biscuits thing in the Philippines, it did well. Maybe it'll do well here. And so he would go around slowly building connections in the local community, tapping friends and family. It took him a while, but he was able to raise millions in capital. And he used this money to construct a large-scale sweets and biscuits factory in Hong Kong. And he named this company M.Y. San & Co. Now, this factory, originally, it was designed to only produce sweets and biscuits. But over time, they started selling other products as well. And this led them to snowballing more and more factories and systems to accommodate all the other products that they wanted to sell. So for example, since their products needed to be in glass jars, they had a glassworks factory built to accommodate this. It's actually pretty impressive that they were able to build something like that back then. Because they were very hands-on in the manufacturing of their products, they started gaining this reputation for producing high high-quality stuff. And this helped them grow really fast. They eventually opened their flagship store in Nanking Road in Shanghai in 1919, which was a big deal because notable figures would frequently visit this flagship store. And the one notable figure that probably meant the world to Maruyuk-san was when Sun Yat-sen himself visited their flagship store. I mean, it must have felt like such an honor having such a prominent figure and someone you support and look up to drop by your shop and enjoy products that you made. And the rise of the company didn't stop there. So they entered the 1920s, and this was kind of like the golden era for MY-san & Co. at least back then because of just how fast they grew. Like at this point, they were offering more than 200 varieties of sweets and biscuits, and they were employing more than 700 people across multiple cities. They weren't only in Nanking anymore. They now had branches in Shanghai, Beijing, Tianjin, Guangzhou, and even as far as Surabaya in Indonesia. Growing fast is good, but sometimes growing too fast, it has its own shortcomings. Like they were opening too many branches so rapidly that he had to give up some level of control in terms of quality. But having a high level of quality was the reason why people loved him in the first place. I mean, I get it. As the company grows, you now have to delegate and you're now focused on making the big decision aspects of the company. And you probably won't have the time to micromanage the small parts of the process. So unless strong systems are in place to ensure that the quality of the products remain top-notch, some loss in quality is expected. And so Maruyuk-san wanted control of these systems. In order to take full control of the production process, he invested heavily in building these factories that produced the raw materials that he needed. And so in 1921, he launched the China National Sugar Refining Co. His logic did make sense. I mean, sugar was the main ingredient of every confectionery item that he sold. So if he could refine it himself, he could cut off the middleman, stabilize prices, and gain a serious competitive edge. But this would come with a heavy price tag though, because his factory needed to be fitted with German machinery. And he even had to travel to the US and across Europe to study modern refining methods. Now, despite being financially prepared for this, everything that he needed to put up this refinery cost much more than he thought it would. Like the costs were blowing up and it was exceeding his budgets. And the countless delays didn't help at all, and so some tension started to grow among his shareholders. Now, his core business, it was growing, but it also needed a lot of capital to grow that fast. Particularly because they're no longer just in the sweet and biscuits business anymore. They added 2 new brick buildings in their factory in Wanchai, and they also gambled heavily into property development when they acquired this block of 14 houses. And it would cost them a lot because they even had to bring in this top architectural and design firm to construct this 7-story building. And these were very capital-intensive moves, and so they were burning through their cash very fast. Maruyuk-san found himself in a bad spot. I mean, he was stretched pretty thin. He was managing a business that was expanding fast across Asia while also trying to launch this massive industrial project that required even more capital. It was a financial nightmare. And even though he tried his best so that shareholders wouldn't panic, in 1925, rumors about the financial health of the company began to spread. And this caused investors to start pulling out. And when investors pulled out, creditors started knocking. He needed to find funds to pay off the creditors, funds that MY-san & Co. needed to keep growing, and funds he needed to build the refinery. And this put so much pressure on Maruyuk-san. And it didn't help that the Canton-Hong Kong strike of 1925 happened. This was a massive labor movement that crippled trade and disrupted the economy. And so all of this, it was the perfect storm. I mean, even though their mooncake business was doing well, the strike did dry up the economy. And then debt piled up, and eventually the creditors did move in and they forced Maruyuk-san to liquidate the company. And that was the end of Maruyuk-san's dream. By 1927, a new company, MY-san & Co. Limited, was created from what remained of MY-san's company. But this company no longer involved Maruyuk-san. This was just the creditors' way of restructuring the debt, hoping that they could revive the brand and hoping that they could get something good out of this mess. But it didn't matter because the newly formed company had a big missing piece, and that was Maruyuk-san. Now, without this leadership, the company didn't really find its footing. I mean, it didn't help that MY-san's brother, MP-san, started a competing company. Now, in 1929, while still seeking funds to keep his dream alive, Maruyuk-san passed away at just 51 years old. Now, I know it's tragic and heartbreaking when you think about this part of his life, but you have to give him credit for building something this big around that time, something that spanned across different cities and different countries, all from nothing. It's still very impressive if you're able to build something like that nowadays, but even more so that time when the tools available to us now weren't available then. And so what happens next? Well, the company that they put up, basically it was a shell of itself. And so in 1934, it failed again. And this time, his largest creditor took over the company. They had plans to revive the factory one more time in 1936, but that never really materialized. And so the factory had to be demolished. And just like that, the legacy of M.Y. San in China quietly faded. But this wasn't the end of M.Y. San just yet, because this was just his China business. Now remember when M.Y. San left for China, he left the business in the hands of Ma Chu. Ma Chu ran the company well, and when he passed away, his widow, Chung Chi, took the lead. And this is when they formally incorporated the company into M.Y. San Biscuits in 1935. Now this is when they would introduce that logo we're all familiar with, the one with the lion, which was very fitting because one of their products during that time, around 1940, was the Lion brand soda crackers. This wasn't really the best period for businesses because this was around 1940 and war was looming. Now obviously they had to cease operations during the war because supplies were just hard to come by. But as soon as the war ended, Chung Chi and M.Y. San, the company, picked up where they left off. They continued running the business, and at this point they were trying to think of new ways to grow faster. And so they figured, okay, I think we need to come up with something new here. Like, we need to come up with a new biscuit, a new cracker. And so they went back to the kitchen, they experimented, went through several rounds of trial and error, and then in the late 1950s, they figured it out. That's when they launched FITA. FITA would end up becoming one of the company's most popular products. Now, as much as I love FITA, it is most definitely inspired by the Ritz cracker, which is very popular in the United States. I mean, a quick glance of the packaging and that's really all you need to know. Now, someone actually posted about FITA in the crappy off-brand subreddit. It's this community where people talk about brands that rip off other brands. And someone pointed out how FITA is a rip-off of Ritz. Now, normally, people would hate on these copycat brands because they're usually significantly inferior products compared to the originals. But a lot of people were quick to defend FITA, saying that it's one of the few cases where the copycat actually tastes better than the original. But anyway, M.Y. San, they didn't stop with FITA. They introduced the graham crackers. Now, personally, I actually thought that M.Y. San created the graham crackers just because every time we make our mango float, I would always see the M.Y. San graham crackers as an ingredient, and so I kind of associated it with them being the creators. But apparently, the graham cracker was created by this guy named Sylvester Graham. He was an American Presbyterian minister from the 1800s. So he had this belief that food should be plain, bland, and vegetarian so that people could stop their sinful urges. And so to stop people from having lustful desires, he created these dry, unsweetened whole wheat biscuits as part of a strict and joyless lifestyle. And because of his belief, this actually sparked one of the first vegetarian movements in America. And his followers, who called themselves the Grahamites, they created the graham flour, the graham bread, and of course, the graham crackers. Now, it's pretty ironic that the graham cracker was created to be this tasteless and joyless snack, and it ended up being a key ingredient when you make s'mores or our very own mango float, which is the complete opposite of tasteless. But going back, so they've already created the FITA, the graham crackers, and now we have SkyFlakes. In 1962, M.Y. San launched what would become one of its most iconic products, SkyFlakes. It came alongside FITA, but while FITA had kind of this buttery, sweet flavor, SkyFlakes was on the other end of indulgent. It was plain, simple, and some would even say that it's tasteless, but I don't know, I think that's exactly what made it so great. In the early days, SkyFlakes came in a square tin can with a circle lid and a red and white striped label with a blue band that said SkyFlakes. And if you look at the packaging today, not much has changed really. When I saw this ad for the first time, even though it was from the 60s, it actually looked kind of familiar. I guess it's because SkyFlakes still carries the same look. You would think that after decades, they would do like a full refresh or a bold rebrand, but I guess the whole "if it ain't broke, don't fix it" cliche applies here. Having a good product wasn't enough though. M.Y. San knew they had to introduce SkyFlakes to the whole country, and that meant taking marketing seriously. M.Y. San was very particular with how they positioned SkyFlakes. Like, they knew exactly what they wanted to communicate, and when it came to ads, they really didn't hold back with the budget. I was going through the ads they ran in the past, and one of the taglines stood out was "Top hit with the in crowd." It sounds funny, and I'm not really sure if it's the type of tagline you would run nowadays, but I guess that time the message worked. And I love knowing about this because this kind of gives us a glimpse as to what worked in the past and what SkyFlakes' goals were back then. Like a company who's still just in this stage where they're still kind of building brand awareness, that company is going to communicate differently than an established leading brand. Like a company who has established top-of-mind brand recognition and who just needs to reinforce the same message over and over again. And that's why even though we can still learn a thing or two from the marketing playbook of leaders like McDonald's or Jollibee, if you're a new player, like if you're a new brand, you're gonna have to use a different roadmap because their brand strategy is not gonna apply to yours. And so the SkyFlakes today has a different playbook from the SkyFlakes in the past. Because the SkyFlakes that time was just trying to hammer into people's minds that if you thought of a cracker, it had to be SkyFlakes. But remember, even though SkyFlakes was ahead and they were early, they weren't alone. Rebisco was founded in 1963, and the eventual makers of Magic Flakes, URC Underdog was founded in 1966. And so there was competition, and so they had to take this seriously. Now, around that time, TVs were just starting to be more popular in the Philippines. This was around the 1950s. By the time SkyFlakes was launched in 1962, most of the population's attention, they were glued to the television. It wasn't like today where you could watch anything anytime. Back then, if there was a show that you didn't want to miss, you had to stay tuned in or else you'll miss it completely. And so that screen had your full attention. And San knew this. And so they were like, okay, that's where we need to be. That's where we need to be all the time. And so they poured in as much as they could into TV advertising. I was going through their ads, and some of my favorite SkyFlakes ads were the more heartfelt ones. There was this one ad where there's a mom and her daughter. And the daughter is clearly a nurse who's about to fly for the States for work. And so she's showing her mom what her workday's gonna be like, what her route from her home going to her workplace is gonna be like. And then the mom, realizing that her daughter has to walk this far, she does something simple, but it's very sweet and very thoughtful. She adds more packs of SkyFlakes to her daughter's luggage. And then there's this other one that I remember. So there's this girl and she's commuting and it's early in the morning. She's heading to work while the city is still asleep. And it just shows her entire journey, bus rides, traffic, walking. And it kind of paints this picture of what Filipinos have to go through day to day. And right at the end, they flash these lines. They kind of shuffle. Nurse ako, teacher ako, OFW ako. And I love this. But not only that, it's actually brilliant. Because this is how you transform SkyFlakes as being just a pack of crackers into being part of the Filipino story. And I know some of you guys are probably saying na, oh, I'm over-romanticizing a pack of crackers. Like, relax, Chris, it's just SkyFlakes. But I'm just amazed how you can turn this cracker and turn it into something else entirely when you do branding and marketing right. Because now this becomes a story of the Filipinos' pursuit for a better life. Because suddenly, SkyFlakes is no longer just a snack. It's what we need to power through wherever we need to go. This now becomes fuel for a long, hard day. This is your extra energy boost while you're waiting for your jeep or the MRT. Because that's what great ads and great brands do. They make you feel seen. They make you go like, hey, they understand what we're going through. Like, they know our struggles. They know what our days are like. And the best brands, they know how to fit themselves seamlessly into that picture and how their products will get you out of that very mess. And SkyFlakes fits the Filipino story pretty well. It's cheap, it's easy to eat, it's the snack you take with you when you're waiting in line at a government's office because you know you're gonna spend hours there. It's a snack that won't necessarily make you full, but just enough to get you over the hump. And for SkyFlakes, it's not the hero, it's the background character. It's not the headline, but it's this steady, reliable companion that has helped Filipinos make it through. And this is partly why they became super successful. And their success eventually attracted the attention of another Filipino giant, Mondenisin. In 2001, Mondenisin, best known as the company behind Lucky Me, acquired San and brought SkyFlakes into its growing portfolio of everyday Filipino staples. And if you think about it, this move made perfect sense. Lucky Me and SkyFlakes are kind of serving the same market. They're both cheap, their stories and their positioning, they're all aligned. If you're into it, they might actually go along together. And business-wise, it was a smart match. Lucky Me was already the most chosen consumer brand in the country. Now, if your lineup of brands include that and SkyFlakes, which is also trusted in millions of homes, this move meant that Mondonism didn't just expand, they fortified their grip in the Filipino pantry. More than 20 years later, SkyFlakes is still a dominant force. In their 2024 earnings call, Mondonism reported that SkyFlakes holds a 28.5% share of the biscuit market. The whole story of SkyFlakes was very interesting, at least for me, because it's a story of how a very simple cracker brand earned its place. Not by being loud or trendy or flashy, but just by being something that you could rely on consistently. And that's it. Now you know about the brand origin story of SkyFlakes. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. If you want to sponsor an episode or if you want to be featured, the links are in the description. My website's right there. Just message me and then we can work something out. You can also follow me on Instagram and TikTok. I have shorter clips there. My name is Chris. I'll see you in the next one.